Hey, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for attending our 1619 Education Conference. We're really excited to celebrate the work of our network teams and also the work of the contributors to the 1619 project. And to that point, we're very excited to welcome our artist panel today. I'm Donnelly Jamna, one of the senior program managers on the Pulitzer Center Education team, and I'll be your panel moderator today. I'm very honored to be in conversation with four brilliant artists, Van Jordan, Cornelius Eady, Kimberly Henderson, and Tim Seibles. After a brief introduction to the Pulitzer Center and our program, I will turn it over to each panelist to share a bit about their contributions to the project before we begin our discussion. This is our flow for today. As saying, we'll do our welcome and introductions. The panelists will have a chance to introduce themselves, to share about their work, and then we'll move into a Q&A before we close out. For the Q&A, you are welcome to share the questions you have using the Q&A function at any time. If you have a question for a specific panelist, be sure to add their name there. And our Pulitzer Center staff that are here in the background supporting will curate that list for us so that we have the questions at the end. We have the settings on our chat so that you are able to communicate with the panelists and speakers, and we will be sharing out those comments with the attendees. So those comments or any resources that are mentioned, things like that, you will be able to follow that along in the chat. And if you're here, yeah, you made it through the registration link. That link will be the same for the entire conference. So if you're joining for events later today, you'll be able to use the same one to sign in. Okay, so now my brief intro. The Pulitzer Center is a journalism and education organization that raises awareness of underreported global issues through direct support for quality journalism and our program of education and outreach. I'm on the K-12 education team, and our mission as a team is to cultivate a more curious, informed, and empathetic and engaged public by connecting teachers and students with underreported global news stories and issues like this racial justice issue that we explore in our 1618 work, and the journalists and artists that cover them. So we're here to connect with some artists here today. Great, and so now I want to just invite each of our panelists to come off mute briefly, and you can introduce yourself and the work that you do before we go into presentations. So Van, if you want to start.
Sure. Hi, I'm Van Jordan. I'm a poet. I'm on faculty on the English department at Stanford University.
Okay. Cornelius.
I'm Cornelius Eady. I'm a poet, playwright, songwriter. I am on the faculty at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where I hold an endowed chair. And I'm also the co-founder with Troy Arcott of the Cobb Economy Workshop.
Thank you. Kimberly.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Annece Henderson. I am the digital curator at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. And I am a writer and a curator and a bunch of other things. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Tim.
Yeah, hello, I'm Tim Seibles. I am a retired professor of English and creative writing from Old Dominion. I was at Old Dominion University for 24 years, and I was taught high school English and literature for 10 years in Texas. So currently I'm just trying to, catch up on all the reading I couldn't do when I was teaching full time and writing maybe a little bit more than I could have otherwise.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you all for being here today. So I'm going to pass it off to Kimberly now to give us a bit of presentation of her work with 1619. The rest of us are going to go off camera, and once everyone is shared, we'll be back here as a group.
All righty. So again, my name is Kimberly Annece Henderson, and just to give a brief background on my work. I started, well, I guess I'll start at the beginning. My work on the 1619 project was curating photographs that would be paired with each of the scholarly essays that dive into the various topics that all sort of, show the lineage of enslavement and how that bled into a lot of different industries and different facets of our society today. And in doing so, my work is based on my genealogy research. So my photo curation started with doing my family history research. And the long story short is that when I started doing my research on one side of my ancestry, my maternal side, I was able to find photographs and textbooks about this community that my mother's ancestors were from. And they have a very interesting story and a very interesting heritage. And so their story is really well documented and featured in a lot of different historical society records in North Carolina. And basically they were of African, European, and Native American descent. And at one point they were called the Little Texas Community in the Piedmont of North Carolina. And they were known for being sort of this isolate community. And they were very successful in agriculture, and they have lineage that, fought in the American Revolutionary War. So when I was researching all of this, and I've been doing this for several years at the time, I sort of was able to stop and put a button on that aspect of my family history research. And then I went and started on my father's side. And when I was researching my father's ancestry, one by one, the ancestors that I was trying to really dive into, they would disappear from formal record. And it dawned on me that they were in South Carolina, they were formerly enslaved. And so for many of my father's ancestors, they first appear on that 1870 US federal census as citizens. And so thinking about that time period, 1870, thinking about what their lives were like prior to their freedom, I had so many questions. On my mother's side, I had photographs. I was able to connect with a distant relative on ancestry.com, which is a platform I use to do most of my research. And in connecting with her, I found, she shared photographs with me of relatives that we had in common. And being able to see their faces reflected in my mother's face and my own face and making those connections was so impactful that when I, went to do my father's ancestry, not having those photographs, it really created a void for me personally. And that paired with the, sort of jarring reality that when you see your ancestor's name on paper and kind of piece things together and realize that they were an enslaved person, and you're finding, wills and other documents of white slave owners who list your relatives as property that they bequeath to their son or daughter, it was a very emotional, it was a very emotional undertaking. And so after I, was kind of trucking along with trying to find more context for the lives of my paternal ancestors, I started to research local newspapers, local historical societies, the same way that I had done for my mother's ancestry. And I wasn't really finding any specific images that I could connect to specific ancestors. But what I did find was an incredible digital repository of photographs of, everyday Black Americans from the late 1800s and early 1900s in a lot of academic and cultural institutions. Their digital collections, they have photographs from this era that they have digitized, that they've acquired from various sources, and they put them online. And personally, I had never seen so many of these types of photographs that I took that and ran with it. And I said, well, if I'm not familiar with these photographs, I bet a lot of other people aren't, because I had never seen them in school, in my textbooks, and anything like that. So I just sort of became really obsessed with images from this period of time, specifically because I was thinking about my paternal ancestors. And it's like, a lot of the photographs are the subjects in the photographs are anonymous, and there isn't really any information listing who they were. And so, you know, thinking about seeing people who look familiar to you in these photographs, but could they be your relatives? It's very possible that they could be, and you would have no way of knowing. So I started this project on Instagram called Emmeline and Them. And it's at Emmeline and Them on Instagram, where basically I just share photographs, digitally sourced photographs from these, you know, digital collections. And that is how my work was found for the 1619 project. And it's really become, you know, it was born out of a passion project for me and my ancestry, but it really has become a way to kind of honor the past, the everyday past. Of course, oftentimes we highlight the historical icons and you know, the people who really kind of helped organize movements. But it's also important to look at the everyday people and sort of having this visual culture to represent that. And, you know, many of Black Americans that were formerly enslaved who first appeared on this 1870 US Census are the same people who walked into a photo studio and took these photographs that are now sort of anonymous, but it's like we have this record of this visual record of the past. And it's just so important to reflect on these photographs and honor their memory. And so when I was given the opportunity to curate photography based on the themes in each of the essays featured in the 1619 project, you know, I really wanted to make sure that I was capturing a breadth of the Black experience. So we all have a unique, ancestry, we all have a unique life story. And that, you know, that made me want to really try to reflect that in my selection of images related to these essays. So for example, I wanted to make sure that I had a variety of skin tones, a variety of ages, a variety of, you know, locations and body types and the whole thing, because it's really important to reflect how broad and how nuanced the Black experience is, and especially related to the themes in these essays. I wanted to really highlight that and capture that. So of course, I'm beyond grateful to have been included in the project, and I'm excited that it's out. I'm excited to see the photographs in conversation with the essays and the photographs themselves in conversation with one another in this book project. So I will now pass it over to Tim. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, that was wonderful, by the way, Kimberly. And I have similar thoughts about ancestry and things. There were letters actually written from the daughter of the family who owned my great-great-grandfather that my father had discovered. So we only have her letters, though we have no idea what the letters were written back. That was my great-great-grandfather was named Cato Seibles. And I think about that all the time. I have no idea what he looked like. Only my oldest ancestor is probably my father's grandfather. So I imagine Cato looks something like him, since that was his son. But I think about that a lot, who we are and the lines that the various journeys that each of our families took to become, you know, to allow us to be, you know. Anyway, I was very interested in Denmark Vesey for a number of reasons. One was, I don't think it's that uncommon if you're a Black person in this country to wonder how you would have dealt with the kind of out front savage racism that defined the lives of many of our distant ancestors. And I think most of us, or many of us, think we would have been, you know, part of the resistance. We would have, you know, we wouldn't have put up with that crap, you know. I think we often imagine ourselves to be really bold and would have been really bold in certain circumstances, but I think it's easy to say that or to imagine that from this distance, but there would be a terrible price to pay for such courage in most cases, not in every case. Perhaps sometimes you could be a rebel and get away with it. But when we think about the number of slave rebellions that took place over the years, starting very early in American history, they didn't often turn out very well for those who participated. We think of Denmark Vesey, when we think of Denmark Vesey, when I think of Denmark Vesey, I think I would have been like that. But I don't know. He had formed an idea of a rebellion. He had been enslaved and then became free, but free we have to put in italics, right? He was living, in Charleston, South Carolina in the early 1800s, which would mean as a person of color, certainly a Black person, your freedom would be heavily constrained in a million different ways, right? Anyway, so I'll just say this. He was ultimately tried and executed for planning a rebellion. What was interesting to me about it was that he was extremely religious. And I'm sure if we think about Jesus, we think about peace and love, but he clearly was able to imagine, a bit of revenge involved in his expression of his wish to be free. Part of his plan was to burn down most of Charleston. That was part of it. He was going to just burn the city down. That was his statement about what he felt about racism and slavery and how Black folks were treated. And after he had burned the city down, he was going to set sail for Haiti, where another revolution had taken place that was successful. We have to put that in italics too, of course. Much has happened subsequent to that successful rebellion that has, left Haiti in pretty rough shape in many respects, but it was still an ideal to which Denmark Vesey was drawn. So anyway, I'm going to read this poem. This is Denmark Vesey, the night before his execution. This chiming light, like God's voice, has found me most mornings. And so many days, I treated the dawn as if it were common, like milkweed or moss. This is the curse of too much trouble, too much thinking and watching my thoughts. Couldn't see past the chance for freedom and plans for revenge that I savored and believed would have worked. Though this be my last sunrise, and what continues will continue beyond my reach, I am afraid, not of the noose, nor of white men and their ease with brutality, but of willful ignorance. That famous stupidity that gives its adherents comfort and many companions. Ever since I came to know how and why my life was disfigured, it's been fury that woke me, fury that took my weary body to bed. I go to bed forever soon, my heart blacker yet for all we might have done. The ones who betrayed us got a few coins, some new shoes, maybe 2 days rest from the fields. And because they've known the cutting snap of the lash, maybe God can somehow forgive them. I'll pass this on then to Cornelius Eady.
Thanks, Tim. Well, my part of the anthology, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for inviting me to be part of this wonderful reading, and also be part of this incredible anthology, which I think is one of the great honors in my publishing and writing career. So much so, more so, given the political climate of the moment. Tim was talking about this idea of rebellion, and made me think that, yes, there are many rebellions. Some of them are obvious and some of them are just plain survival. And I consider that, I consider that a rebellion. It allows you to live. One of the things that, and allows us to become who we are. A lot of people had to eat a lot of crap and put up with a lot of stuff in order to allow us to be who we are. To give us the space to become who we are, I feel, and that's a rebellion, in some ways. I think that the 1619 book anthology for me really sort of underscores what I feel the moment that we all seem to be passing through. My term for it is we're filling in the blanks. We're writing those stories. We're recapturing those stories that couldn't fit when we were younger, when that didn't belong or was ignored or passed over, and we're trying to reassure that we will not have that kind of amnesia anymore culturally in this country. So it's fantastic work, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I think that my contribution to this has to do, of course, with the idea of Kavikalam, which is in some ways you can see is also kind of a rebellion in its own kind of quiet way. This is based on the Black, the color conventions that started in 1830, when the AME Church, Reverend Richard Allen got this together in Philadelphia in response to a lot of violence that was going on in Ohio against Black folks staying, living, being happy, however you want to make, whatever, fill in the blank, that was wrong, right? So, the idea of bonding together, the idea of what happens when we recognize each other and we try to help each other is kind of sort of the DNA of Kavikalam as well. At least something that Toy and I had in mind when we were trying to put Kavikalam together. So I feel to kind of resonate between what Kavikalam was doing and the colored conventions. So I had that in mind as I was writing the poem. The poem is called We as People, and I have to apologize before I start reading because this morning I broke my glasses. So I'm going to try to read this without my glasses. I might stumble a little, but I'm going to give it a shot. We as people. In Ohio, Black folk can walk free, but you still have the rights of a mule, a chicken, a bloodhound. Ever see a bloodhound cast a boat? Ever see a piglet try to right some law? We as people have to stop waiting while the mobs sweep the Cincinnati streets of Black skins, Black thought, Black laughter, Black prayers, Black homes, Black children, Black songs, packing our bags with bruises, skinning our breath with knuckles, the tar dipped, lit, and tossed on the front porch of your consideration. Some of us took that hint and flew. Exit, exile, exodus. Others wondered why Jesus let the cops chase their fancy unpunished. But we, as people, have to stop asking a flood to stop being a flood, expecting a hurricane to grow some manners. We have come to Philly to find out What happens when we stop running and we start talking among ourselves? What better selves do we knit? When you open the doors to a shelter after a bad storm has passed, ain't that air sweet? Even if the town is in splendors, ain't you happy that storm tried its level best, but couldn't stop your heart? And I'll pass it on to A. Van Jordan.
Thank you. Thanks, Cornelius. That was beautiful as usual. I think it makes so much sense that I'm coming after you now, talking about Alan Locke and the New Negro. Cave Canem has kind of created a renaissance in African-American, not just poetry, but I think literature in general. We have probably more African-American poets being published now than any time in history. And largely from the efforts of Cave Canem and Cornelius and Troy Darracott as founders of that. I'm a proud graduate of Cave Canem. I was in the inaugural class of that, the inaugural cohort in '96. And when I think about that, it reminds me a lot of what Locke was pushing in the 1920s around the New Negro. And that's my contribution. I come in 1925, talking about Alan Locke and, or as Ossie Davis, he pronounces his first name Alain Locke, but I hear most scholars pronounce it Alan Locke. Locke, like our Tim Seibles, was from Philadelphia, and you know, very erudite, much like his contemporary Du Bois. And one of the things that was going on at the time was that he and Du Bois were both these intellectual giants. Du Bois being the first African-American to get a doctorate from Harvard, and Locke being the first African-American Rhodes Scholar, also a Harvard graduate, and both presenting and representing Black excellence, both scholars. But the thing that's interesting about Locke is that, and I think about this a lot as a poet and a creative in an English department at an institution, is that Locke was a scholar who was absolutely dedicated to promoting the Black artist. And in 1925, he put together the survey, a survey graphic, a replica of it here, of the Harlem Renaissance to come, and the work of different artists, visual artists, poets, prose writers, just talking about the Black aesthetic, you know, in the 1920s. And there was a little friction between Du Bois and Locke, in that I think Du Bois thought of that work being strictly in the service of propaganda, as like promoting the idea of Black excellence and through art, strictly through political kind of propaganda. But Locke was saying, no, we don't need that. That the individual expression of the Black artists is plenty enough to promote Black excellence. And despite the rhetoric between the two of them, I don't think they were that different. I think they actually were working for the same cause, but it just was presented through a different piece of rhetoric. And ultimately, art in itself is the preservation of culture. And you can't get away from it. And so in that way, it does become a kind of mechanism for propaganda, whether one wants to or not. I mean, we often will talk about what makes a political poem, but the real issue is like, what is not a political poem? Any kind of art can be politicized and seen through that lens, because if you're trying to preserve culture, there is often a political position on that as well. So with Locke being this kind of intellectual architect of the philosophy of the Harlem Renaissance, he gave rise to basically giving a space for and a route for these artists to express themselves. And some of that also came through with Langston Hughes a year after this in 26, writing the Negro Artists and the Racial Mountain, and sort of talking about that that need to be able to express oneself and to be oneself in their art. So in the spirit of that, I'll read my poem, my contribution to this great book. And once again, I said it off camera, but I just want to say thank you for, as Cornelius was saying, to be a part of this collection. It's really an honor, and just glad I was able to make my small contribution here. This is the New Negro, and I wish I could have handed these to Cornelius, but I need to put mine on as well to read my piece. The New Negro. A Negro voice spoke through a boy's open mouth. A Negro voice survived through a boy's lynched neck. A pen stroke, a brush's sigh across a taut drum that, under a dark hand, darkens further into song. To read, to write, to see, to paint. Life, a deer trot through cattail tall grass. Death, a figure crossing against the light. Capture what you see and make sense of what's out of view of the beholder. The talented create as much as they think. Intellect, some call it. Uppity, some call it. Du Bois enjoys under cover of night what we sing throughout the day. The mind has leapt, so to speak, upon the parapets of prejudice. The mind has leapt, so to speak, over the mute of proper into arpeggios of jazz. And what to make of those shoes, green anaconda enshrined, and what to make of the bend in the brim of that hat, the break of that slack over those shoes' laces. Details grow in importance when art reaches higher. Uncle Tom and Sambo have passed on, and even the Colonel and George play barnstorm roles from which they escape when the public spotlight is off. Insist on capitalizing the N and the N word, Negro, per letter dated February 18th, 1929. Still, a Negro voice sings to the crowd from the hanged body in the tree. Maybe he once chewed licorice in his mouth. Maybe an idea formed before he could recite its lyric, mistaking the secret vowel, a vowel as round and as warm as the skin of his hand. Keen yet soft as the consonant N, which he'll still wield for his praise song, for his honeyed verse. But that's cool, he'll say, that Negro boy with licorice blithely hanging from his mouth, a mouth filled too with poems and with curses, with regrets and gloating. The boy who calls the future to him, who sees the pattern in the stones set on the path up ahead, and without a second thought, will speak and others will lean in a bit closer, hoping to hold some essence they can neither hold nor fathom without him. Thank you. That's it for my part. So I guess I'll turn it back over to the host. All of us.
Yes, hello. Everyone is coming back on. And I just realized during that time that I had presenter view on my screen, but I was not sharing the slides. But we'll figure out well, I can just do a quick view right now, and we'll figure out a way to share them out. It just felt like such a natural flow, and you all went with it. So it's like everything's moving. It's great. Which, you know, kind of speaks to your artistry and presentation. So thank you. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I did want you all to just get a quick glimpse of some of the photos that Kimberly mentioned and that are included in the book. If you don't have your book yet, definitely feel free to get them. But so each chapter of the book has an image, one of these images of Black people in everyday life that starts it. It has the essay, and then it has several creative works that follow on this timeline. This is a snapshot of Tim's poem that he read, and the fact. So each of the poems, and they're also tied to the events, and there's information about the event, what happened, and what the poem is drawing from. And then these beautiful slides here that Van was referencing. So sorry, y'all. We will get those to you, but I wanted to do a quick share before we jump into our question and answer. Thank you all so much. I speak about the creative works in the project as like a love letter, I think, to the Black community specifically, obviously learning for all of us. But I remember going through the contents for the anthology the first time and seeing your names and the names of the other contributors there, and thinking about, you know, all of these people that are artists and writers and creators that I love, and students engaging with them. And it was a really beautiful thing. And I think that this panel so far has highlighted that. So thank you for sharing about your process creating this work. And one thing I'm curious about that, Kimberly, you already kind of started to speak to, and I want to invite all of you to speak to, is your response to seeing your work in conversation with those other artists, right? Yeah, I know you may have relationships with some based on the work you've done together and, you know, reading and working together in other spaces. Some you may not know, but yeah, what was it like to see your work in conversation with these other writers and artists? Did it make the work take on new meaning, you know, because you kind of work on your own and you create the piece, but now it is together in this anthology. And I'd love to hear you speak to that.
Are you asking us generally, or are you talking to Kimberly right now?
I'm asking you generally, anyway.
Well, I can start. Yeah, well, I was, you know, there's several things that are going on. I mean, first of all, of course, it's an honor to be included in an anthology of that magnitude with so many of the poets and writers that I already love and admire. I mean, that, you know, that should almost go without saying. Cornelius spoke to it earlier about just being in it is just like, I could just put a period on the sentence right now and just walk away, you know? So that was a great thing. But it's also, on another level, I mean, I learned so much reading the book. I mean, as I said in another workshop, I thought I knew something about, you know, Black American history, you know, and then I read the book. I thought, man, I've been living in the dark way more than I thought. So that was also something that was really, it was both humbling and, you know, invigorating. But Yeah, I love it. And the idea that implicitly, you know, our poems are talking to each other and talking to the chapters that they precede or follow and so on. I just love the whole idea, in addition to the fact that so much that has not gotten said got said. You know, that
Yeah,
is also something.
yeah. And I feel the same way. It's just, at one point I thought, okay, it's another anthology that we're all going to be in, and we'll kind of go through and see, where we fell on a timeline. But the thing that blew me away was I would read the different prose pieces, and then they would go into nonfiction prose, and they would have fiction, they would have poems. And it was like the camera just kept pushing closer and closer in, and so you get this interiority that, like you said, Tim, I just, things I just didn't know about. And you just made it much more of a living text than I anticipated, reading about history, and I think that's one of the things that's so important, not just about the anthology itself, but the entire project, the docuseries, the education component that the Pulitzer Center is doing. I think about like how powerful this would be if it had been available when I was a kid, and so and I think what's happening around the country right now is that people realize just how powerful it is, and that's why it's getting some, pushback in schools and things about teaching this kind of material. So I'm just happy to be, like everyone else said, I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, I just have to add on to what everyone else has already said and what I've already said myself. Like I said, it just felt like I've been in anthologies too. I mean, I got into Kevin Young's anthology. The first anthology I got in was Michael Harper's anthology, which I just thought was just one of the great honors of my life. But this is different, right? This is a different text, and it's up to its ambitions are different. They're simply just saying, here's some great Black poets, right? And to me, like I said, I think at this moment what we're doing is filling in the blanks. As Tim said, you think you know stuff, but you don't know nothing, right? And like Van said, right? These are the stories you didn't hear when you were younger, right? This is the stories you didn't know anything about, right? Because there's no where would you get those stories, right? Where would you find them, right? So even if you were looking, if you knew to look, where would you be looking, right? So it's one of those things where for me, it's like, again, to be included in that company is just really an extremely high honor in my view. It's like, and also, again, yes, being in the anthology, all of you is really, really incredible. But when I was writing it for the book, I wasn't thinking you guys. I was thinking I was actually thinking of two things. One was that I wanted to make something that was going to talk to my subject, right, correctly. And number two, at Copy Column, we call this thing called you ought to bring your A game, right, right. And I became keenly aware of the fact that I had to bring my A game to this book, right. That nothing slighter than that is going to suffice for this, right. But I had to if I'm going to represent, I have to represent because Van's in it and Tim's in it and Youssef is in it, and fill in the blank, right. And so I got to match the excellence of the people that I know who are excellent, right. So so I felt that pressure when I was writing that poem, and I'm very happy. I think that it worked. But again, it's kind of like, this book is especially the way things are going now with the of the AP courses being cut, or the threat of it in Florida right now, right. This is exactly what this book is counterbalancing, right. And we're also, in my mind, we're struggling for the future. The reason we have the 1619 book is because you can fast forward, go backwards about 30 or 40 years, and all the agitation and all that stuff about Black studies and all that stuff, that opens the door that leads the path to where we are now, right? Fast forward 20, 30 years, if Florida gets its way, and we start erasing right? What do you get? Right? What culture do you get after that? And it is a relief to me to be in a book that's already in its way, making a response to what's being tried right now in terms of erasure of African American everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can lead me to a question that Van kind of already started to answer, which is like, and after this one, we have a couple from the audience that I'll jump to, but with the significance of the work, right? The history that's in there, in the teaching spaces, sometimes we'll call it like hard history. A lot of the educators that are utilizing the project want to center joy. They want to build emotional intelligence in the work that they're doing with learners. And they find the photos and the poetry and other creative works very useful for that objective. So I'm curious about, what do you think that the structure of this project, or maybe other similar projects that you've worked on, what does it tell us about the relationship between art and understanding like history and society, right? That doing that well, doing it in a way that just lets learners kind of bring their whole self and process it productively.
I'll start by just, talking about representation and the fact that if I had this book as a kid, if I had seen these images, more of these images as a kid, it would have grounded sort of how I felt in the world, and it would have helped me be more confident. Even, one of the things of doing my ancestry research and also just working with these photographs is that it helps me feel like I belong in a world where oftentimes, you already know. So it's sort of like, I think it's really important, and it's incredible that they decided to add photography to this book. It's a lot to take in, it's a lot to consume. And I think we have such a visual culture nowadays. We're always consuming images and photographs and sharing them with one another. And so I think it's beautiful that there is such a variety of Blackness represented in the photographs that kind of, punctuate each of the essays. And it's a moment for you to pause and just sort of think about visually how we present ourselves, but also in relation to how our likeness is used and in ways that we don't approve of, that we don't intend for it to be used. And so it's just sort of like a way to take ownership of our image. And I love that that little plot point was added to the book in between each of the essays and the other works.
I was going to say, if I could also, we often talk about a book like the 1619 Project, like it's supposed to just do a favor for Black people and other people of color. But I contend that if people were reading this book, all colors of people, we would be building a society based on a truer sense of things, which is the society we want. We do not want a society built on who, me? My parents didn't. We want to know what really happened. How many times I heard white people say, oh, but my family didn't have slaves, as though that means like, well, then you don't have to think about race. It's not an issue for you because you aren't implicated in slavery. And it's like, that's not at all. I've said this many times in class, and I will not rant. I'm always tempted to. But you just say, look, what we're trying to do is repair the entire society. Like, white people suffer in the ignorance in a different way, but they suffer just as we do as Black folks. We have to know what the story is upon which our lives are founded. And this is what the 1619 Project is doing, I think. So it's not like when white people, or certain whites, I should say, no, we can't teach that. They're not. I mean, yeah, certainly it is not a good thing for people of color, but they're also damaging their own community. And that's the thing that I want my white brothers and sisters to realize, man, they're not just stealing our history, they're stealing your history too, and your knowledge too. Anyway, all right.
Well, speaking to the knowledge piece, and you all reflecting on some of the things you didn't know before reading with the book, Charles is asking, did that discovery you experienced when reading the project, when working on it, spark new research topics for you? Are there new things you're exploring in your work now after engaging with it?
You know, I think my work, I often look back and at history, and I'm usually thinking about some moment in history that is a part of a larger moment, but it's something smaller. You know, so this was a bit of a confirmation that of the importance of that kind of exploration in the work. And you know what happened, you know, for people who don't know, like when we got the call about being a part of this, they gave us a list of dates that were available, and you kind of looked and could see, oh, I think this, you know, maybe I could say something about this moment or that moment. And you know, the 1925 was such a critical moment for you know, the modernity in the modernist era. And the work that's, you know, that often happens in English departments, kind of like what Tim was getting at, when they talk about that period of time and the work, they act like the Harlem Renaissance was something that was going on, you know, like somewhere else. Like it was like this thing that like the, you know, Blacks were playing with in Harlem, while Eliot and Stein and all these other folks were creating, like, you know, important work. But you know, this is the work that really has stood the test of time and represents America. When they did a poll, international poll, to see who was the most recognizable poet of the 20th century for U.S. Postal Service, Langston Hughes, you know, was the poet that rose to the top, and there was no one even close in the rankings, you know. So that was the power of that period and the work that came out of it. And so much of their work was about smaller moments in the daily lives, the kind of neo-realism of the life of African Americans. And it really speaks to what America was built on.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting close on time, but I have one more that I want to ask from Suzanne, who is wondering whether Cornelius could describe the Cave Canem work further, and for folks who are not familiar. And I also welcome others to share about how intellectual and artistic communities such as Cave Canem feed your work.
Oh, okay. We haven't got enough time for that.
I know.
I'm not trying to be flippant. That's a long answer. I can simply just say that it's a you know, Cave Canem is a workshop retreat, now a foundation. It started 25 years ago. Me, Troy, Derek Hutt, my wife Sarah Micklem, my mother-in-law Carolyn Micklem. When we got to our second or third year of Cave Canem, it was a summer retreat that's met in a number of places. Van was is old G. You know, he is dying the wool. Can't get any further. Can't get any more real than Van, because Van was right there in the first group of Cave Canem fellows. Tim taught you know at Cave Canem. And you're seeing Cave Canem right now. You're seeing it in Van. You're seeing it in Tim, right? We had
and I'll say also just and a lot of the contributors.
Yes, and a lot of the contributors are, and we've had influence, you know, in the 25 years since we started, and it's too complicated for me to simply just make it a quick explanation to it. But yes, you know, my experience with the Cave Canem workshop has you know, altered my life. Right, it was one of those things that just simply, it was a life-changing event in my life. not only because I got to hang with some of the great poets, Black poets, out there, but I got to see Van become Van. You know what I mean? Right? I mean, it's just sitting there, hearing him read his contribution. I was like, yeah, there you go. That's what you do this for. There you go, right there, right? This young man, calm, unlike me and Tim. This sort of go off the handle. Oh, kill them all. Can't stand it. Van's nice, very calm, very rational, right? Right. But you also get you also get the measure of the different voices right there, right? Of who we are and how we can actually converse with one another. Right? I mean, Van has every right to simply go, Tim and Cornelius, God, these old fogies, get out of my way. What's wrong with this fools, right? But but he accepts us and forgives us, right? As one of those things where, that has been the Comic-Con spirit. It's just sort of like being around that for 25 years has really just sort of cemented my sense of what African American poetry is about, what the poetic is before, and as Tim was saying, how important it is for the entire culture. Right? This isn't just for Black folks or people of color. This affects everybody, right? And for me, it's made me more of an optimist. I'm telling the truth. Because I know this thing to be true, right? I know that to my bones. I've had it proven to me over and over for 25, 26 years. So for me, life isn't always a bed of roses, but I always have this idea. I know this one thing, right? Right? About who we are and how we can talk to one another and how we can hang together, even though our differences can be vast, right? Like you were trying to point out, about the Harlem Renaissance and the different rhetorical arguments, right? Right? That runs all the way through it. I actually gave my class here in Tennessee, the Langston Hughes essay, and then I gave them the Trey Ellis NBA, to compare and contrast, right? Trey Ellis wrote something called
aesthetic,
the New Black Aesthetic, which echoes so much without mentioning it, right? But they would not consider themselves, Harlem Renaissance poets, right? But there's so many things that were resonating about. They were talking about the same thing, but in their own era, and you could see the different eras at Comic-Con when you go to Comic-Con, and the different arguments. But they coexist as opposed to being at each other's throat. We accept it and we learn from each other.
Yeah, and also one of the beautiful things about Comic-Con is that most of us, certainly Cornelius and I are of the same generation. I think we were mostly working kind of in solitary.
Yeah.
And so, but once Comic-Con emerges, you get this synergy. You suddenly realize there's all this Black intellectual, artistic, soulful energy going on there. And so the sum is greater, right, than it's in any of its individual parts in total. It's and that was one of the great things. I imagine that is analogous to how the Harlem Renaissance worked also.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I know for myself, I would not be here if I didn't have the model of Cornelius and Tim and Toy and the folks who came before me, because I say all the time, and my wife is she's off camera, but she's right here. She's heard me say before, like, had I not seen Cornelius read in DC at the time, it was like I needed to see the model of another African-American male doing that work and doing it at a high level and as a serious artist, because I come from a very working class community. I didn't have a model like that, and it changed everything for me. And so now Cornelius, you and Toy, you've created an army of examples now. They've been dispatched out into the world. So you see it here too. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been an amazing panel. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the attendees. The next conference event is our Connecting 1619 with Local Histories panel, which starts at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. So we hope to see you there. And in the meantime, you should feel encouraged to share your learnings and takeaways using the hashtag 1619. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank
Really enjoyed
you.
it.